be starting in half an hour.
Okay, so you're live. Did it work? Where am I supposed to?
Are you ready?
Is it back? So, Nick, this is the official kickoff meeting for the stakeholders group for the health and safety element. And I'll tell you all a little bit why this is so important to the county. I am Aaron Bach. I'm the Assistant Director for the Resource Management Agency. I'm the holder of the general plan for the county. And I know this was updated only a couple of years ago, but there's been a lot of changes in state law. So we'll get to that in a second. Next slide. So first of all, I'd like my team to introduce themselves. Again, I am Aaron Bach. Chuck Przybilski will pretty much serve as the project manager. He's also the same person who did the housing element for the county a couple of years ago. I wasn't able to attend today, but if the rest of the team can present themselves. Ross?
I'm Ross Miller. I'm a chief engineer with the Public Works Group, and I, among other things, work on flood control projects.
And then we have Hernan. Is he online?
Yeah, Hernan, chief engineer with design and construction with the RMA.
And in the back, we have Susan.
Hi, Susan, I'm planner for RMA.
And Susan is coordinating this effort for us, so we greatly appreciate her effort. David Alexander.
David Alexander, I'm a project processing planner too for the county government.
And then while they are still in attendance, we have two Civic Sparks fellows. So Go ahead, Nick.
I'm Nick Johnston. I'm the current Civic Spark Fellow with Tulare County Planning, and I'll be replaced by 2 more next year that'll be working with you.
He was so good, we need 2 to replace him. And then we have Marlise as well.
Hi guys, I'm on Zoom. Sorry I can't be there in person, but my name is Marlis and I am working as a Civic Spark Fellow with the Department of Water Resources and helping with this effort.
And last, we have Elizabeth.
Hi guys, I'm Elizabeth.
Very good. Next slide. So just for today, just give you a basic project description of what we're doing, who the staff is, the stakeholders, and how we're going to go about community outreach, and give you a quick schedule. And by area of impact, we will discuss the vulnerabilities in the county at a 40,000 foot level. Eventually, though, we'll be really getting down into the weeds in some of these communities. But for now, we'll just give you a basic outline. So hopefully most of you were in attendance for the last HMP. Just so everybody knows, it's one of 3 in the state that has checked all the boxes for vulnerability assessments. So it's one of the few that have actually, at least in the state sides, achieved what we are ultimately statewide trying to achieve as far as adaptation and resiliency. So the 2018 effort was a great effort. But again, we do have concerns that if we are not fully in compliance with state guidance, that we might not be able to maintain our continued access to mitigation grants. So that's one of the main causes for what we're doing here. What is adaptation and resiliency? Adaptation is an adjustment in natural or human systems to a new or changing environment, such as increased frequency and intensity of climate related hazards or other climate related conditions. And resiliency is the capacity of an entity, an individual or community, organization or natural system to prepare for disruptions, to recover from shocks and stresses, and to adapt and grow from disruptive experiences. We are moving forward with the safety element under a general plan initiation from the board back in 2019. It's taken us a little bit to get where we're at, and I'll explain why this has become imperative for the Resource Management Agency to move forward on. This is our schedule. As you can see, it goes out 2 years. It's interesting, the state wants 6 months to review our final product. And I believe last time, even before that, they gave the state a quick look at the plan itself for a couple months. So you're looking at probably about an 8-month review time from the state. So it really shortens up the time frame quite a bit. Hopefully, because the changes to the plan itself shouldn't be that dramatic, we should get shorter review times. But again, with as many, if you look online right now, as many of these plans that are being done by the cities and counties across the state, I think those review times are going to stay pretty consistent at 6 months. But we are hoping to get it all done by June of 2023. The reason the schedule is also out there, Andrew Lockman's been very nice to forward us a lot of information. So as these grants are coming forward, we've been applying for them. This would also be the same schedule that we would be following if we were to get the grant from Cal OES for this project. But you know, given the amount of time it's taken, even our CDBG grants to get kicked out, we'd probably be done with this project by the time we actually receive the money. So again, the imperative here for the Resource Management Agency is because of state law. By the time we update our housing element again in 2024, we need to have at least started or completed this process. I don't know how much the state's going to hold us to that, but it might be grounds for HCD to not allow us to complete our housing element. Especially with all the stuff going on with wildfire, I'm sure that'll be cause to hold up a lot of housing elements in the state. So the county team itself includes the resource management agency staff. We intend on meeting twice a month. The stakeholders are all the cities within the county and some of the special districts. We're meeting with the Association of Special Districts tomorrow. They do want to be involved. And we're planning on meeting with the stakeholders quarterly. And then one of the critiques of our MJ LHMP previously was there was not a lot of outreach to the communities. And so we want to address that. And it seems to be the key to getting future funding is to do as much outreach as possible. And so we want to make sure we're consistent with that. And so we're committed to 12 meetings over the next 2 years with the communities. So we use the 4-phase approach. The state came out with guidance, adaptation planning guidance that we are mimicking. In fact, when I was filling out the grant application to use that APG theory, basically they didn't let you go out of the color out of the boundaries. So this schedule we're going to use and by phase was what's kind of a state directive to use. So at least when they're reviewing them, they should all be consistent across the state. So it's a 4-phase approach to the 2020 standards. And unlike the previous HMP, this is going to, instead of being a separate document that's incorporated by reference, this is actually going to be in the general plan for the county. So the unfortunate thing is if we're going to change it in the future, we have to do a general plan amendment. The general plan amendments are fairly easy to do in this county, so that shouldn't be a problem. Next slide. So the first phase is to define, explore, and initiate. One is to look at the motivation behind addressing some of these issues in the county and the full scope of all the impacts from climate change. We pretty much already assembled the teams and the resources, but again, if we ever do get into a grant situation, we have to show how we follow each one of these consistently. Identify climate effects and community elements. And again, this was one of the critiques we got from our previous fellow and some staff at Cal OES was that we didn't reach down into the actual communities. And we talk a lot about the cities, but not so much about the unincorporated communities. And then in that regard, we're really trying to get out and create an equitable outreach, as the state's calling it these days, and make sure that we're engaging fully with the communities so that they have some input into this plan. Pretty consistent with the HMP that was already created. We're going to look at the exposure levels, sensitivity and potential impacts. Don't see a whole lot of change there. It's just, again, how deep we're going to dive into looking at those potential impacts on the actual communities in the county. One of the most important things nowadays is the capacity for extreme heat. Read a recent article that Tulare County might be the hottest county in the state of California here by 2080. And that gets into this vulnerability analysis that we'll be looking at. And again, then we're going to go back and present it to the communities and progress on outreach and engagement. Next slide. And this is where the rubber hits the road here. The analysis itself will summarize the information, will confirm our visions and goals with this group, as well as with doing outreach to the communities. Probably the most important thing, and this is where we'll have to start really looking at some numbers here, is a prioritization of the strategies that we come up with as a group. And again, go out to the communities and present the information. And then phase 4, looking at the state guidance, is actually after we're done, how we implement this. So we'll be looking at future plan revisions and kind of set an agenda when we're going to update it again, and kind of what those thresholds are for updating. I do remember last time we had this approved, Ross was good enough to call FEMA to make sure that we were all good for grant funding. Again, we did check all the boxes last time we went through, but with the new guidance, we just want to make sure that we have clear feedback from these agencies that we are doing exactly what they want to see. We want to make sure that no matter what, we'll always be able to have FEMA funding, but even CAL FIRE or even going after this grant with Cal OES, I had to check boxes because we did update our safety element in 2018. We could actually get a lesser amount of money because we weren't doing it for the first time, but we were actually able to proceed, because if we had been able to check some of those boxes out for a general plan, might not have been able to proceed. Like I was saying, we're updating the LHMP, and the difference here too from 2018 is we will actually create an adaptation and resiliency plan in our general plan. And again, these will identify impacts, mitigation, and updates to the safety element. In other words, we will have clear new policies in our safety element, whereas we didn't before in regards to hazard mitigation planning. And again, the stakeholders, probably the biggest mission for us is to actually come up with the strategies. Again, they're in our previous hazard mitigation plan, but with the new information the state's providing us and with the new information we have, I think we might want to change some of those strategies and look how we reacted to previously to impacts from climate change. And the other thing is we will be doing a little bit more in-depth models to the vulnerability analysis, so you can really see how things are going to play out through like as far as our horizon through 2080 or so. The impacts here are pretty consistent with the state guidance as far as energy, drought, wildfire, and invasive species. I think we've been impacted in regards to all of these. So nothing new here. Future stakeholder meetings will show more examples of impacts. We'll show you, again, the LHMP mapped it fairly well last time, but I think this time with the new information we have available to us, we will be able to get into more. Some of the fire contours and some of the drought contours are probably not consistent with our most updated information. So we'll be able to actually show you where drought is most likely to occur, and as far as the deepening of the water aquifer contours, where flooding is most likely to occur. Our actual flood plan from this county is as old as I am, so I mean we always look to updating it, but I think it's in the flood plan itself isn't our general plan, so it would be wise to update that, but I think we make that a pretty strong goal in this case. I think those are the type of strategies that we would be looking at implementing ultimately, and obviously we're all concerned about wildfire these days, especially as the lightning floats over at night. It's kind of scary. So, but again, the general plan isn't going to solve all these issues, but what the state wants to see is that we are at least addressing them and how we're addressing them. Because if we don't, we're not going to be able to do something different as far as if new regulations come down for development in the foothills because of fire. If the county wants to do something differently, our general plan is the only document we can really look to support moving in a different direction and explaining how we're moving in a different direction. And with that, I will hand it over to our Civic Sparks fellows to discuss drought. And then when we're done, I'll give a little discussion on Sigma and what that means as far as information we have available to us now that we didn't have before. But is Marlise ready?
I am ready. Can you hear me, Erin?
Yes.
Okay,
Go
great.
ahead.
Thank you. So as part of this adaptation and resiliency plan, there's also going to be a drought risk assessment, like Erin mentioned. And the purpose of the assessment is essentially to show where vulnerable populations lie within Tulare County and how drought may disproportionately affect different communities based on where they're located. And so with these highlighted through a drought risk assessment as part of the bigger plan, that might be able to help local decision makers use the information to prioritize resources and funding and assess who's the most vulnerable. So the assessment we're developing uses a tool. Here's a screenshot of it, like the web page. When you first enter the portal, there's two tools, there's two portals, one for small water systems and one for rural communities, or what this is referring to as self-supplied communities. So it's more of an aggregate picture for communities who rely on their own domestic sources of water. It relies on the census block group level analysis for these rural communities. And that's why the map is divided into census block groups, as you see here. And this tool is developed by the Department of Water Resources. Some of you may be familiar with the County Drought Advisory Group, which came out of a piece of legislation as a result of the last drought we were in. And part of that process, that stakeholder process, they developed a set of recommendations, and part of it was also developing this tool. And ultimately, this tool is meant to be used in these kinds of same ways that I'm describing today, as using for a drought risk assessment, because ultimately it would lead to the development of a water shortage contingency plan, which would be another planning tool or document, sort of a resource required under this legislation if it passes through the legislature. So it's currently Senate Bill 552, if you're curious to look it up. And then if you go to the next slide, as part of our assessment, we wanted to fortify some of the more data-driven claims we were making by speaking with a number of community-based organizations in Tulare County. So folks like the Community Water Center, Self-Help Enterprises, Leadership Council for Justice and Accountability, all were very generous with their time and spoke with us about some of their experiences working with water-related resources and kind of emergency response in Tulare County. And here's a word cloud that we came up with out of those interviews. And you can see there's a strong emphasis within these conversations on community, water quality, wells, aquifers, contamination. So the bigger the word, the more often it came up in conversation. And this slide is just to give you a sense of the importance of regional coordination and community knowledge sharing. This is all important in overall understanding which populations within your jurisdiction are maybe the most vulnerable. So the next slide. This is the last slide I'll be speaking about. Within this assessment, this is sort of a snapshot of the main drivers of risk in Tulare County related to drought and water shortage. So land subsidence, overdrafted basins, chronic declining of groundwater levels, water quality, social vulnerabilities such as transportation or income, as well as climate change temperature increases. So like I mentioned before, on our online interactive web tool, there was a screenshot of 2 slides ago. That sort of serves as a flag, if you will, that relies on other databases for its information. So the topmost map here you see is a depiction of land subsidence within Tulare County. And Tulare County actually experiences the most extreme land subsidence in the state of California. It is the only county that has red zones like this, which means upwards of 3 feet of subsidence, which is when the ground is essentially sinking because of groundwater extraction. So that's pretty extreme. And it's something that is important to highlight as far as drought risk goes. The second map down below, Aaron mentioned this earlier. This is from CalAdapt, which is this online tool that shows climate projections based on climate impact research. And this is a timeline of projected extreme heat events in Tulare County over the next half century. So jumps all the way up to upwards of 60 days of the year experiencing extreme heat events. So these are just two kind of indicators that overall impact like vulnerability to drought under current circumstances in Tulare County. And altogether, this information is helpful to paint a picture of who is able and not able to maybe cope with drought. And we're in a drought right now, as you all probably know, so it's important that this is happening, and it's an important piece of this overall adaptation and resiliency plan. And I'm going to pass it back to Aaron to talk about groundwater.
So the Groundwater Management Act, basically made it so we have these plans that are in place as we speak now, and being updated pretty much constantly as we try to catch up to the real information. We have some of what they call the largest wide areas that don't have surface water or any regulatory control by irrigation districts in the state of California. So we didn't have a lot of information compared to a lot of the other counties and cities. So when it came to actually creating a plan, it's flying a little blind. And after we come out with our second annual reports, we're starting to see the contours forming in places that we didn't necessarily expect from the data we originally had. So by the time we get to the 5th year, which will be the first big review time frame for the state, we're supposed to have our stuff at least have some of the regulations in place for these for the agencies themselves based on these plans. So after these 5 years reviews, all the way through 2040 being the year that everything better be in place, or they are absolutely coming down from the state. It's a long time out there. Our general plan only goes to 2030. And so the problem is you get into a drought year like this one, looking to next year, and your plans don't really say what you're going to do. Like the East Kauai right now, East Kauai GSA scrambling to come up with a number, and everybody's getting assessed, and some people aren't too happy about that. But the point is they were a little bit behind in coming up with a policy or a plan compared to like East Tulare or the Kings. So they're scrambling, and the problem is our general plan doesn't speak to any of the stuff at all. So we are going to update our water element ultimately, but I mean that goes to drought. And speaking to drought now, these GSAs are supposed to handle it. In fact, I do remember the governor saying we don't have to do an emergency down in the San Joaquin because we have Sigma in place. And 2 days later, he figured that wasn't going to work. So it doesn't matter. It's the farmers aren't getting their surface water flows right now, so they're back on the ground. So you're not going to see a big change to that map. The other problem is that a lot of the GSPs, the plants themselves, use subsidence as a proxy to show that they're not sustainable. So when those contours keep shrinking, the state's reviewing these things, it's going to continually showing that we're not getting even close to what we call a nice glide path to sustainability. So at the very least, our general plan will look at that, and hopefully some efforts in the future as far as adaptation will show how we can pump water back in the ground. But I mean, there's so many different regulations out there that stop us from putting surface water back in, much less more groundwater back in. So, those are the types of things that we'll try to adjust through this plan and through our general plan. And hopefully the state sees it the way we do, so we can move forward. Even if we don't have Regional Water Quality Control Board buy-in, putting surface water back in the ground, at least we'll have it at the county level. So that's what we're hoping to do with this plan here. And with that, I'll turn it over to Ross to talk about flood control.
This is missing my slide. All right. Hi, everyone. Ross Miller. My apologies. I'm missing a slide here, but I will go forth. I'm here to talk about the potential for flooding impacts. So as climate changes, there are changes in stream flow, the timing of snowmelt, as well as, thank you, there we go, as well as the amount of snowpack, which can all affect flooding patterns. With increased temperatures, snow will begin to melt earlier, and doing so can overwhelm water storage facilities, causing flooding and other issues. I've shown up here 2 floods from the Kings River in Tulare County, one from 2017, one from 2019. In both situations, excessive snowmelt, early heat waves caused water flowing into the dam upstream to exceed capacity, as well as their regulated storage levels for that time of year, leading to large releases, leading to significant flooding downstream, including throughout the entire stretch of the Kings River through Tulare County. In addition, climate models are showing an increased likelihood of larger and warmer storms, resulting in increased rainfall and flooding. Some models are predicting the number of atmospheric rivers that come through the county the number of them to increase, and atmospheric rivers do have a strong potential to cause urban flooding, flash flooding, and other problems. In addition, flooding can cause soil erosion and transport sediment and contaminants, impacting drinking water supplies, agriculture, and infrastructure. Next slide. In addition, I have here photos of Cottonwood Creek. This was, I believe, the 2010 flood, which caused significant impacts to local county infrastructure. And next slide. In terms of hazard mitigation, what we're looking at in terms of flood mitigation are reducing the hazard. This would either be through diversion or storage, which are dams, levees, detention ponds, recharge basins, diversion structures, etc. And just coming back to the importance of this plan as well as its use, projects that are proposed and included within this plan later can become eligible for various forms of funding, including FEMA hazard mitigation funding. And every time there is a declared disaster, hazard mitigation funding flows to the states. And there have been a lot of disasters, so there's a lot of money in this. It is unfortunate but true that because of everything that has happened, there's a lot of money that will be coming up. So including projects like this can lead to the creation of more of these large-scale diversion structures. In addition, there is also potential for restoring streams and floodplains. I brought this item up as well because of the previous slides. Cottonwood Creek through that section has been significantly realigned from its previous natural alignment. Lastly, in addition, there's also reducing the impacts of floods. There's either physical or economic steps can be taken. This can be everything from elevating structures, elevating utilities, other forms of what are considered flood proofing, and changes to behavior, designating higher risk properties as open space, adopting and enforcing floodplain regulations, training people to respond to flood watches and warnings, and whatever changes to those systems that National Weather Service is in the process of making. And lastly, flood insurance and participation in the National Flood Insurance Program.
Lastly, we just wanted to touch on the wildfire impacts. The reason I really got a little bit concerned about not having our, and this goes back to not having our climate action plan within our general plan. It's actually not even incorporated by reference, total separate document. We change it at will, no problem. It's approved by resolution. No general plan amendment required. But the thing is that some of the other agencies are starting to incorporate that document because of GHG reduction. They're trying to get some credit for because some agencies are actually starting to get sued, but mostly by NIMBYs, on regular development projects because they don't address the safety element. It does address wildfire impacts, but it doesn't address the new APG guidance, and it's not done in the right format. So city like Oxnard got sued on a typical development project because Ventura County didn't have the new wildfire plan in their general plan, so it's people are looking at different avenues to attack projects under the heading of GHG analysis. And so, I mean, ultimately, at the end of the day, what we're looking for is to start guessing at what the ultimate, and you'll see in the models, and we had some models done previously for the HMP, but you'll see in the newer models, as you saw, the increased heat days and how that could potentially affect wildfire ultimately. But we also want to start looking at the climate action plan for how much the GHG increases are going to continue to increase the heat in the area. So a lot of communities are starting to look at how those two things interact. And the judge went so far as to say he wanted to see how the climate action plan was being affected by or wildfire plan was being affected by GHG itself. Real obscure stuff, but that's what, the state wants us to start looking at. And again, they have all new guidance at OPR that's really easy for us to follow. So we don't feel like we really need a consultant to help us get through this analysis. But the wildfire impact is probably the most important component of this, because I think that's what we want to make sure we can always get the funding for, and that our general plan addresses the wildfire impacts. I don't think I'm telling anybody in this room anything new about the SQF complex fire, but I would also like to really, show the state, how we addressed it afterwards, during and afterwards, because I think that's kind of what they're looking for, your process, beyond the emergency planning process, but the continued follow-up process all the way through. And in a little bit, one of the critiques was the basically in our previous plan, we took a lot of the emergency plans and put them together, showed it to the state. Again, we did the vulnerability analysis, but I think they wanted a little bit more connection between those two, and really get the cities a little bit more involved here and see how the county's plan really gels with the city's emergency plans. And I think, moving forward, they want to see that tie-in to, how we would strategize around multiple fires interacting with the cities, and, really go beyond as far as workshopping and thinking and strategizing. That's really what the state's looking for in our next go around. And of course, the new regulations are probably going to speak to this quite a bit, when and if they come out. And then on top of that, we're talking about potentially even more draconian regulations coming down. But all this stuff is going to be built into the regulations. But our general, if we want to do something different, we've talked about this a little bit already. If we want to do something different, have a different plan or policy, it's got to be based on our general plan for starters. If we want to have our own ordinance or something like that, to make it defensible legally, it's got to start with the general plan safety element. So again, this is our project schedule. This is the kickoff meeting. We're looking to July to have our first community outreach meetings, and not until probably October will we get back together. But by that time, we hope to progress quite a bit on having some of that vulnerability analysis done for you, so we can start showing you maps, start interacting, and hopefully move this forward in that time frame I was talking about. Again, the ultimate deadline for us on RMA side is 2024, but with the eight-month review time before that by Cal OES, it's gonna really short that time frame up. So we only have a year and a half, year and a quarter to really get this done. So any questions?
Aaron, our involvement is your planner, they're pretty much going to reach out for information for these line items, right? They'll be all started soliciting information when they're requesting it.
Yeah, up front, and ultimately we're going to solicit all your information around the strategies. The Office of Planning Research has made it really easy. I mean, pull a lot of this information off the shelf. In fact, even coming up with this information, San Bernardino and Riverside are pretty much already down the path of putting something together here. So we're going to utilize, OES already did the hazard mitigation plan last time. So, and the consultant did a good job. No one's, again, the state recognizes that, but again, moving forward though, they're going to be looking to do what Riverside is doing right now as far as outreach and everything else. And I think with these fire regulations coming down, if we do want to do anything different, they're going to look to see if we did everything the state wants us to do as far as utilizing their guidelines. So yes, immediately we'll be soliciting information, but after that, we'll definitely want your input for strategies. Did the chief have anything to add?
Now, we've done all of these evacuation plans with the exception of Three Rivers Hot Springs and Badger, so we're good there. And we've done those in real time.
And that's what I think they're looking for is best practices to see if you can create policies around those for the county. And honestly, as far as the general plan itself, the implementation just takes so long, but again, these are real-time things. It's not like we're doing corridor plans on Highway 99 here, this is real and necessary. So again, that's what I think the state's looking for, but they also want to reach out to the communities, and we want to go up to some of these mountain communities and see, they get their input, their reaction to what's been done.
Okay, and you talked about this draconian changes. I think Kevin and Pete and I have been involved with 8038, SB 55, and then we changed the title 14. It's going to be very unique how we make all this mesh together.
Right. And again, everybody in this room's been through this, so it's nothing new. It's just the new models and information. Again, the second annual report for these groundwater management plans were shocking. The contours around the cities and were as expected, but they'd be out in the middle of nowhere. Random farmers, taking a whole lot of groundwater out. We're starting to monitor it. So on the drought and the flood side, I think that's where we probably have the most work to do. But it would be nice to have that all in our general plan. Any other questions, comments?
Are we still on Zoom?
Yeah.
Does anybody on Zoom have any questions?
Hey, thanks for the prompt. It's Andrew at OES. I do have one question or two questions for you. I heard your timeline was 2024. I just want to confirm, does that reconcile with the end of the 5 years that the current plan is good for?
Yes, it was interesting. Cycle 6 for our housing element does concur with the actual timeline for updating of the HMP. Again, but with the review times, we got to get the HMP done early. Yeah, it works out really well for us.
Okay. Two other thoughts, comments. One, I know you've mentioned cities and getting out to the rural unincorporated communities. Has there been conversation around engaging the tribe? I know at one point they kind of did their own for other reasons, but they're also still in ours. So I didn't know if they were going to participate in this one or not.
Yeah.
And kind of corollary to that, I know one of the other things that I didn't hear you mention was, since we did the last one, there's been a lot of interest in special districts in participating. So you've mentioned GSAs in this conversation, but a lot of community service districts, PUDs, and so on and so forth, so that they can access mitigation funding. So I don't know if I heard you say you're meeting with the association. I just want to make sure that we were planning on engaging whoever wants to come to the table there.
Yeah, definitely engaging with the association for starters. And then ultimately, I'm sure we can talk about this with the CSD's engineer, see how interested he is in engaging in this process. I don't know how engaged he was last time, but yeah, that would be a starting point. As far as the tribes, we did reach out to them, and go ahead, Susan. He's online right now, so I think we're good there as well.
Thanks, sir. That's all I had.
Again, hopefully this isn't too much work for all of us. We're just trying to update things, but I think the information that we're going to see here is going to look at a little bit further and be a little bit more shocking. And ultimately, we want to get LiDAR. We want to fly this county. We want to actually know what the elevations are. The cost estimate's $1 million. Hopefully this could be grounds for starting to get that from the state. We did all this magnetic readings with Sigma, and we have all this new information from satellites, but it's that contour level, 1 foot level information we need to get so to really figure out what we're doing with flood control in this county. But again, I appreciate everybody's time.
I have a question. So from Joe, is there any specific information you are interested in from the tribe?
We'll be in contact, Joe. Yes, lots of information. And really, we will dig into the 2018 HMP to see if there was holes in the information we received, but we'll definitely be in contact. I did want to, if there are no more comments or questions, Nick, if you could real quickly you're showing the website right now. Is there anything special you want to show as far as navigation?
The website basically has all the information that was presented today distilled in a web format. So you can see we'll have the videos of the recorded community outreach meetings, graphics, stats, the last local hazard mitigation plan, as well as the timeline and events calendar. And then we compiled a list of resources for all the different hazards and different agencies that publish data sets. So you can find those here. And at the top, you can see there's a link to click on a survey for community outreach, and that link is also on each of in front of you in the table. So if you can pull out your phone and scan that, and on your way out, take that survey. You can bring these handouts back to your own agencies and distribute them as well.
And was there any entertainment as far as a movie or anything like that? We got it done? Okay, good.
And some of you might be excited to see yourself in this Golden Globe awarded movie here. But this is our educational video that we'll be distributing it throughout the county.
Shucklian, Chair of the Tulare County Board of Supervisors, and I'd like to welcome you to this video. Today you'll be hearing from many of our community leaders and partners talking about Tulare County's Adaptation and Resiliency Plan. Tulare County has a rich history. We are one of the top producing agriculture counties in the nation. We have our Sequoia Kings Canyon National Forest with the largest tree in the world sitting right in our own backyard. The Valley Oaks are throughout our county and they're beautiful, meandering along our many creeks. So that's why it's more important than ever that we preserve these great natural wonders, and that's why you are here tonight going to be listening about our Adaptation and Resiliency Plan so that our communities will thrive for years to come.
Defining hazards, there are many hazards in Tulare County. Fire department, our biggest hazards are floods, fires, medical emergencies, hazardous materials, and anything associated with the geographic area. And one of our jobs in the fire service prior to response is to mitigate these hazards and to get the community involved in hazard mitigation and have an awareness of what's actually going on, the worst case scenario, the best case scenario, and how you can prevent from becoming that worst case scenario.
A lot of agricultural risks are associated with weather, climate change, drought conditions, and invasive species. So there's a lot of different things that make up the word mitigation in the sense that we're trying to always manage for risk and minimize those threats to create a crop or produce a crop that's going to be brought to market.
Having a plan, we have information historically and data that shows how typical we're affected and how often we're affected by each hazard. An adaptation and resiliency plan is a document to keep track and how to plan together throughout different jurisdictions of our region to be able to help us adapt and adjust to climate change, and which making us ultimately more resilient.
Talk about some of the risks or some of the inherent challenges that exist in agriculture and how that affects our work community, how it affects our small rural communities. Agriculture is a really important economic driver here in Tulare County. Probably 1 in 3 of our jobs directly impacts agriculture and employment here in the county. We know it has a significant multiplier effect in our county as well. So when we deal with drought or surface water, reductions or lack of rainfall, or any other kind of threat like an invasive species threat like from the Asian citrus psyllid, those all have impacts related to our workforce as well.
Un plan es un documento de investigación que va a ayudar al condado que tome sus decisiones en un futuro. Investigue las condiciones existentes de los peligros climáticos naturales, como incendios, inundaciones, sequías y especies invasivas. Identifique las comunidades más vulnerables relacionadas con cada uno de estos peligros. Colabore para encontrar soluciones e ideas para minimizar el impacto de estos peligros en el futuro. Lleve el plan a la Junta de Supervisores para su votación. Una vez adoptado, el condado trabajará para implementar las soluciones en nuestra comunidad para ayudar a nuestra región a adaptarse a estas amenazas crecientes.
Managing climate adaptation and understanding some of the risks and some of the mitigation strategies that Tulare County needs to investigate is really important, and it's a conversation that our entire community needs to have. It's not just a part for ag to have a seat at the table. It's not just about making sure that our rural communities are represented. It has to be an opportunity where we have that conversation around a broader table with a broad audience of stakeholders.
Please get involved. We need to hear your voice. The more voices we have, the stronger our plan will be.
And this is your plan. This is to make you safe, so get involved.
Success of this plan relies on input from local experts, community leaders, and residents to join the discussion. Tulare County wants to hear from you about your challenges and your ideas to make our region more resilient.
I want to thank you for watching this video, and I also want to encourage you to get involved in your community. It's so important that we continue to protect and preserve Tulare County. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, everybody's involved here. We've got to figure a way to mass produce that, you know, but we'll get it on TV somewhere. Again, I appreciate everybody's time. We are fully committed to getting this done in the time frames we have. So all your input is greatly appreciated. And if you have any ideas, just give us those ideas so we can use them. Thank you.
Everybody, there is a paper survey in front of you if you want to fill it out before you leave, or